We're here at Rhythm Traders, and let's just jump right into it.
Cool.
So, Brad, where'd you grow up?
Eugene, Oregon. I was actually born there. Went to high school in Eugene, and then when I was 18, moved to Portland, went to Lewis and Clark College, and graduated about 4 years later.
Nice. I want to go back to Eugene real quick. So, how'd you get into drumming? Like, did you start drum set, concert band, like most of us, jazz band, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think I figured out that I wanted to be a drummer from a pretty young age. So, I think the first time that I recall like really being enamored of drummers was when I went to a church Christmas concert, and we sat by the timpani, and I'd never seen drums so huge, and then they were just so like big and robust sounding, and I'm like, I want to be a drummer. So when I was in third grade, I started lessons. I was armed with my Regal Tip 5A nylon sticks, which was kind of the thing back then. Syncopation, and then work through all the books, stick control, Funky Primer.
Of course. Eugene, Charles Dowd, right up the street.
Yep. And so I did that all through school. Concert bands, jazz choirs, jazz bands. Even had like my own little garage band called Action Bureau when I was 16.
That's awesome.
Our moms had to take us to the gigs in the back of station wagons because we couldn't drive.
Yeah.
And then that was super ironic because we got paid in beer, and then our parents would pick us up, and it was just a big mess.
You were 16 and they'd pay you in beer?
Yeah, because we played for frat parties and stuff on the U of O campus.
Okay.
So this is Eugene, especially in the 80s. I did that all through school, and then by the time I went to Lewis and Clark, I focused on the social sciences. I kept playing music and kept studying, and I was in the band programs there, but my major was sociology and cultural anthropology.
Nice. And so I think that's going to sort of lead us into how you got into the African side of it.
Exactly. So it was freshman year at Lewis and Clark College, and there was a class being taught by Obo Addy, who is arguably the person who brought African drumming to the Portland area.
Yeah.
So he was teaching a course, and I signed up. It was a group class with about 12 or 15 people. And so at that point, I'm like 19 years old, and I'd been drumming for 11 years. And you know, when you hit like when you're playing drum set and you hit one of your toms, it just makes one sound.
Right.
I mean, you have the soft tom sound and you have the loud tom sound, but it's still just a tom sound.
Yeah.
And then I remember seeing Obo's hand technique and just seeing what he could do with one drum. He would get like 5 different sounds, but then you got your right hand and your left hand, so you got 5 different possibilities with your right. Like you could flam and do like a tone slap, or a bass slap, or a bass tone. So you actually have what's 5 times 5, like 25 possibilities for every single note.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you took Obo's class and then decided to go to Africa, or was it like a trip he was offering there?
Gotcha. Well, actually, there were 4 more years.
Right.
As a drummer and someone interested in culture, I was drawn to cultural anthropology, which is basically the study of groups of people, often in developing parts of the world. So I kept drumming, and then locally in Portland, while I was still in college, like drumming for dance classes, African dance classes and whatnot. And so I ended up, Lewis and Clark is a big writing school, and so we all had to write senior theses. Mm-hmm. So mine was like 120 pages on looking at music as a tool for understanding tension in urban West Africa. There's all kinds of tension in West Africa. You have Christians and Muslims.
Yeah.
You have blacks and whites. You have different linguistic groups, and so there's just a lot going on. Mm-hmm. So while I was in college, I am still becoming more and more interested in drumming all around the world. And so when I graduated, I took all of my money, which was about $3,400, and I bought a one-way ticket to Ghana. And I figured, I would just move there and set up a bunch of mini apprenticeships for myself to see if there was a particular ethnic group that I wanted to study with, or a certain line of inquiry, or a certain region, because I was actually planning on going back to graduate school and maybe getting a PhD and teaching this stuff.
Yeah.
But
wait, so when you left, you had no connections over there. You just took your bread, bought a ticket, backpack, split?
Almost. I had connections in the sense that because I had studied with Obo, I knew his family.
Okay.
And then I studied with another guy, Niardi Alote, and I played drums for his dance classes and stuff. He was also a ga drummer from Ghana. And so he hooked me up with his family. So basically I had a host family in Accra that was expecting me. And I used that as a launching pad, and then over the course of about a year, traveled to different regions, studying different things. Just because I thought it would be a travesty.
Okay.
If I went and got a PhD and then discovered, I don't like African food, or I don't like sleeping under a mosquito net.
Right.
And so basically hopped on a plane, one-way ticket. My host family picked me up. And then I tried to take 3-week or 2-month blocks and live in different regions doing different things. So for example, one of my first ones, way up north near Bolgatanga, which is near the border of Burkina Faso, found a woman who was brewing millet beer. So I asked her if I could apprentice under her just to learn the process and learn how things move and everything. And she said, yeah. So lived with her for a few weeks brewing millet beer and taking it to the market. And then through that experience, I met some nomads, Fulani Nomads, and they took me under their wing, and I lived with them for a couple months. They're nomads because they keep track of the cows. They and they have to move to different areas based on where the grass is and whether it's rainy season and where the watering holes are and stuff. And so we were modern day nomads in the sense that we had little black Chinese bicycles. And we cruised around with the cows. I did this for a couple months. We would milk the cows, turn it into cheese, take the cheese to the market, trade that for tobacco, take the tobacco and buy 2 chickens and bring chickens home to eat.
Wow.
So, and
that's great. That's cool.
It was kind of cool. And these were people who, this is about 500 miles inland from the coast in Ghana, and these are people who had never been to even their own capital city, Accra, but who hadn't even met white people.
Right.
So when they saw me, a traveler, they took me under their wing because they identified with me. They're like, you don't have to explain yourself, Brad. You're a traveler, and we're travelers too. Right. You're just like us. Why don't you come with us? We'll take care of you.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Yeah.
And after two months of that, I was getting ready to go, and they gave me like a little crushed up grocery bag, and it had money in it and guinea fowl eggs, which are like chicken eggs. And I looked in it, and it was like $20, which was all the money this family had.
Yeah.
So I turned to my host brother Ali, and I said, Ali, I can't take this. I mean, I'm moving on, but I'll be okay. I'll meet people. Right. And so he translated that to his mother, and she got really stern and angry with me. And she's like, no, you can't do that. You're one of us. We know that traveling's hard because we're also travelers. Please take this money and take these guinea fowl eggs and be healthy on your journey. Here is a little known fact. These are people that by Western measure we would call illiterate because they don't read and write. But they're the smartest, most literate people that I've ever met, because even the mother is fluent in about 10 different languages. Wow. So Ali, because they're nomads, they move into different ethnic zones. So they speak Ashanti, they speak or Chui, Dagomba, Frafra, English, French, Hausa, of course, Fulfulde, which is their own language. And so, they're master linguists, even though they can't, quote unquote, read and write. So Ali, he also was, because of his language skills, was hired by the Ghanaian government to basically help other Fulani nomads as they traveled, because these guys don't really recognize borders. So when they're taking care of cows, they'll cross into Cote d'Ivoire, or they'll cross into Burkina Faso because that's where the water is. And so then there's problems with identity cards and visas and stuff like that. So my buddy Ali, who I had met at a truck stop actually, is I would say a master linguist. And so it even though not everybody spoke English, he did. And then wherever you are, even if you show up in a village and no one speaks English, once you say what your mission is and why you're there, they'll send to the next village to get the one kid who's maybe 12-year-old and studying English in school, and they'll bring him back to translate. So no matter where you are, somebody will speak English. This is in Ghana. If you're in the Francophone part of West Africa, it's exactly what I just said, only it's French. I sort of kept up all these mini apprenticeships or internships, and then I was off to Tamale, which is in the northern region, and I went to the village chief and said, "Yeah, I'm a drummer. I'm interested in social sciences, and I've come to learn more about your culture." And so he paired me with a oral historian and master drummer living in a small village of Kumbungu outside of Tamale. And I lived with this guy, and I was one of them. I would, like, if our chiefs met, I would go with them and put on my outfit, and then go meet the chiefs. And if we got paid in kola nut, I also got paid in kola nut.
For some reason, I think of tamale as that square drum. Am I making that up?
That's also called a tamale.
Okay, but no relation.
No relation.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because the tamale drum that you're talking about, which is a relative of all the square drums, you have kolamashi drums, you have the gome drum, which is the big box drum that you sit on, and tamale drums, which incidentally are played by the Ga drummers in southern Ghana and have nothing to do with tamale. Or hot tamales for that. So
you're with the chief, and
so I lived in Kumbungu with this master drummer for a couple months, and that was very, very humbling because he was also apprenticing his 8-year-old son at the same time. So you had me, I was like at this point 24 years old, and the 8-year-old. And they don't start by playing drums. They have to learn the entire history, almost as if they're like Homer in the Western tradition. And so they have to learn about all the wars and the famines and the chiefs and the different order of chiefs. And so we would sit there, and so I was trying to learn the language, and the son was trying to learn the oral history. And so we'd be like basically singing, and then we didn't even touch a drum for like a month. And when the son would, like, let's say, mix up the order between two chiefs, the dad would stop him and be like, "No, that was Sunjata." And then he would start again. And the other thing is, these are the people who play the quote unquote talking drums. So they call them lungas. And so these are drums that basically play linguistic phrases. So now when the 8-year-old son picked up his drum, and let's say he had like a paragraph or 3 paragraphs worth to say on his drum, he could do it because he knew the history. I couldn't even get through 2 sentences, and all the women in the compound thought that was the funniest thing. So it was very humbling because I had looked at drumming through the rhythmic component,
right?
And then here was a different approach through language. And so to be like a grown man who considered himself a drummer, and I can't even play for like a minute without people laughing at me, was humbling indeed.
Yeah. So with the African aspect, do you find that kind of influences your playing today? Does that kind of seep in there?
Absolutely. So it's been fun to first start off as a kit drummer, reading music and then playing with sticks, and then transitioning to African drumming, and then most recently Cuban drumming, where you actually combine hand technique with stick technique. So I would say, my personal style is pretty eclectic. So I've learned the traditional or folkloric traditions from some of these places. after Ghana, I'll sort of fast forward here. Then I spent about 6 weeks in Dakar, Senegal, and then I've been to Conakry, Guinea, to study with the masters there 2 or 3 times. And so when I came back to the States, I started playing with a younger Ghanaian who was a nephew of Obo's, a guy named Chata Addy, and he had a high life, kind of a funky high life reggae band. So high life is the contemporary music coming from Ghana. And so they incorporate drum set and also traditional drums. And so I played with him for a number of years, 4 or 5 years. We cut a CD, we played regionally.
That's a great CD, yeah.
Thanks, man. And so that sort of informed my style. And
a bunch of other cats in town, because everybody was chasing after you that played those gigs.
Oh, thanks.
You kind of set the bar for that style here.
Well, I got it from the source because I had studied the traditional stuff, but then Chata would sing these high life parts to me, boom boom ga, boom gaga, boom boom ga, boom gaga, and then he would sing them to me, and then I would play them, and so I learned firsthand rather than secondhand or third hand, and also it was really exciting for me because. Sometimes when you learn something from a DVD or a book, it's a little bit sterile. But like learning using language and having them sing rhythms to me, which is exactly how he learned back in Ghana, was a fun way to approach it.
So kind of going back to Ghana a little bit is... you got to tell the story. It's my favorite story of how they shuttled you around. And
what I think you're talking about is I was living in a small village in the eastern region of Ghana called Okarase. And this is when I was studying with the drum carvers. And it was a drum carving village. So they basically specialized in drums, of course, the Ashanti stools, and the mortars and pestles that they use for making food. And so our village did all of those things, and I was sort of one of them. So I had a Master Boatin, whose name is kind of like mine, and I stayed with them for a couple months, and he was responsible for me. And so he was responsible for my socialization, to make sure that I met friends, for my health, for my nourishment. And so it was a fabulous experience because we would be at the workshop making drums all day. But when business was slow, we would go to his cassava farm and we would harvest cassava. And so the entire village sort of took me under their wing. And this is at a time of I was the only white guy, of course. It's before electricity and telephones. It's probably changed a little bit now, but it was very bush back then. So what happened is there was a wedding between someone in our village, Okarase, and the next village down, Adesu. So they're drumming and dancing, and all of the carvers, including myself, were invited to this wedding. And then all of a sudden, a fight broke out, and I didn't understand what was going on, and so it was terribly confusing because everybody spoke Chui, which was a different language anyway. So I went to my carver buddies and I'm like, "What's going on? This is really weird. It looks like there's a fight." And he said, "They're fighting over you." And I said, "What? I didn't do anything. I was just like standing there and watching." And he said, "Well, we saw them trying to put some juju on you and hurt you because they were jealous of our village and the fact that you were staying with us, and so they were trying to hurt you using witchcraft. But we saw it, and so we attacked them, and so instantly I felt bad, and I felt like I turned from a observer in this culture to a participant, and a reluctant participant at that." And to cause something like this, and then it sort of got worse and worse and worse. They started throwing rocks, they started swinging mortars and pestles, and the whole wedding ceremony broke up. I ended up going and hiding under a table at the marketplace, and I'm kind of under there hiding, and of course it's in my village, and so all the guys know me. So one of the guys at the market comes up and he's like, "Brad, would you like a cigarette?" And I don't even smoke. And I'm like, yes, yes, please. And so I did. And so I stayed there until dusk.
Under the table.
Under the table. The village is still sort of, I don't know what's going on, but there's still rocks flying and people yelling. And so this guy at the market flagged down a banana truck that was carrying bananas back to Accra, and explained the situation, that they had a white guy that they had to get out of the village. And so I hopped on the truck and then rode it's about a 2-hour trip back to Accra.
In the back of a banana truck.
Yeah.
Then let's flash forward to the Ghana trip. You're coming back, and then how did you start the Rhythm Traders?
Gotcha. You want the 5-minute version, the 10-minute version, the hour-long version?
I want the version, the Brad version.
Alrighty. Yeah. Well, we've talked about some of it. So I'm doing all these like mini apprenticeships all over Ghana, and so I stumbled into this village, the same one we were just talking about, Okurase, and I went to the carvers. And believe me, this is going to circle back, because this directly is sort of how I started Rhythm Traders. Went to the carvers and I approached them about learning their trade from them. So I said, hey, I'm interested in learning how to carve drums. Do you think I could, stay here and learn? They were baffled. Like, okay, first, like, why would someone want to, someone who comes from a country with skyscrapers and Cadillacs and software companies, why would they come to a village anyway and then want to learn something like drum making? Mm-hmm. So I had to explain myself that yes, I come from America, which has really well-known popular culture, and we have big businesses and we have tall buildings, but when you build a building, the guy who designs it, the architect, he doesn't know how to install windows, and the guy who installs the windows doesn't know anything about the HVAC, and then the HVAC guys doesn't know how to install an elevator, and then none of those guys know how to market the property to get tenants in there. And so I explained that although we have businesses that are successful and wealthy in America, what I like about what you are doing is you control the whole process from start to finish. Every one of you carvers know how to cut down the tree, hollow it out, carve the inside, carve the outside, go hunting for an antelope, put the antelope skin on, and then play it. And so I explained that that's something that we don't have in America, because we have this assembly line structure, and yet in Ghana, it was so refreshing to see how things were made start to finish, and how workers had complete control over that process. So, that was all interesting to them, but it boiled down to finances. And so we struck a deal finally. They asked me, they said, okay, well, that sounds reasonable. So our little outdoor workshop here, we don't have any music, and we have a boombox, but our batteries keep on running out. So if you can go back to Accra, buy us a truck battery, you got yourself a deal. So I went back to Accra, bought a used truck battery for about $75, came back to the village and commenced my apprenticeship. So stayed there for a couple months, learned the entire process, carved drums myself. There were funerals. I would play drums for the funeral, and towards the end of that 2 months of my being there, it was sort of a sped up version, because usually in apprenticeship, when you are learning something like drumming or even farming or driving a taxi or something like that, it takes a couple years.
Right.
So I told them that it was about time and I had to move on. So they went to the blacksmith and ordered up a set of tools, and then they called the whole village and had a ceremony, and they presented me with my tools. And it was a ritual. We sacrificed the chicken, and we poured libations, and we said prayers to ancestors that the tools wouldn't hurt me, and that my business would be successful and whatnot. And they presented me with these tools and declared that I was now a drum carver.
Yeah.
And then, the whole village is there, all the other master carvers, and they asked me, so Brad, now that you've learned this, you're going to go back to America and carve drums, right? And I didn't know what to say, because on the one hand, it had been an academic exercise, but on the other hand, it had meant so much to me in my life. But we place a premium on labor in America, and it's very expensive. And like to carve one of these drums, whether it's a Pon logo drum or a djembe or something, just the carving takes 40 or 50 hours. And then you have to get rings and skins, and you have to sew the skins on, and so the whole process takes a long time. So I knew they wouldn't understand that. So I turned to them and I said, "Thank you, everybody, for this valuable experience. You've taught me so much, but I don't know if I can support myself if I am carving drums in America." And then they all got really sad, and they're like, "Oh, you mean if you're carving drums, you won't be able to buy meat?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would be able to buy meat." But I said, I'm just a regular guy, and I was planning to go back to school. And so they all looked kind of upset, because I was kind of one of them, and I was kind of, they were expecting me to be their ambassador. And so they're like, "Oh," so the masters kind of huddled, talked amongst themselves, and then they presented me with an offer. They're like, "So, okay, we understand that it may not make sense for you to carve drums in America, but why don't we send you drums, and then you can sell them for us?" And then I kind of smirked, and it was quiet. There was like a long, awkward gap. And I said, "Guys, again, like, I've had such a valuable experience, but I studied social sciences, for God's sake, and I haven't taken a single business class. And I come from a family of teachers and social workers, and I don't know the first thing about business. I don't think I could market your drums. I don't think I would be successful." They looked visibly upset, talked amongst themselves again, and then they made me the offer that I could not refuse. They said, "Brad, we understand. We would like to send you 12 drums at our expense, and we'd like you to take them to America and try to sell them. If you're successful, send us half of the money back, and we'll send you 12 more. And if you're not successful, we can all smile at the end of the day, because at least we know we tried." I couldn't refuse. And that was the birth of Rhythm Traders, because they gave me the 12 drums. I took them to the post office. I mailed them to myself, opened up a tiny little storefront at West Burnside over by Powell's Book. It was a little teeny thing. And I basically had just my own little imports. So I had my 12 drums, some incense, a couple daishikis, and some like African bags. And I figured, I would do my best, that I owed it to these guys to be an ambassador for their craft, and I owed it to them to at least try. And then what happened completely surprised me. I had enormous support. We started having classes. I started diversifying, and even though it started with the Ghanaian drums that I imported myself, pretty soon it's darbukas. And then I had sabar drums and djembes, and then I got my first set of bongos. And I kind of expanded from there. So, even when I started that little teeny storefront, and it was the birth of Rhythm Traders, even then I thought, here's the scoop, Brad. You're going to do this for 2 years, and then everyone in Portland who needs a drum is going to have it. They won't need you anymore. You won't be relevant. And then you can go to graduate school and study what you were going to study. And this would be like a little super positive hiccup along the road, but just part of the process. And then here we are 27 years later. It's expanded, and that little seed that was planted in Okurase in the eastern region of Ghana has completely changed and informed my life.
So, are you still planning on going back to graduate school, or is that's run its this course?
I'm 51 now, so there's no chance of that. So that's an interesting point, though, because there's two ways to gain credibility when you're studying culture, and one is to have a PhD behind your name. So you're like, Joe Schmo, PhD, cultural anthropologist. And you can earn a certain amount of respect, but the other way is from experience. So yeah, I lived in Ghana for a year when I was 24, doing all these apprenticeships. Came back, started my store, went to Dakar and met carvers and imported drums. Went to Guinea, studied there with Mamadi Keita and imported drums. Went to Turkey and visited the cymbal foundries and imported cymbals. Went to Cuba and studied with the Cuban masters. So in a way, I'm doing what I always wanted to do. I'm traveling, I'm learning about culture, but I think I'm actually getting deeper inside the culture than I would have if I had those 3 letters behind my name, because I think people trust me just as a regular drummer. Yeah. And so for me, that's been the greatest passport. And one way to look at it is what started Rhythm Traders was my interest in culture and understanding people and communicating and breaking down barriers. And then I started the drum store as a means to facilitate that. And so in a way, it's been a means to the end in that Rhythm Traders is a conduit to allow me to do what I really want to do and who I really am, which is to learn about the world and make the world a better place. And so by selling congas and bongos and cajones, drum sets and snare drums and cymbals, I've actually been able to do that. One of the things that's fascinated me about Cuban music, Brazilian, Haitian music, is that all the roads sort of point back to West Africa where I had been. So when I hear patterns like tumbao or marcha in the Cuban tradition, it sounds a lot like Ponlogo or High Life that I've seen in Ghana. So for me, I didn't want to just stop my interest in my research in West Africa. I wanted to learn more about this transatlantic dialogue. Yeah. And so Cuba was the next spot. So you had gone a year or two before me and just said how amazing it was. And so I thought, this is a natural extension. And then P.S. in our store, we sell Cuban instruments. We sell congas, bongos, cajones, timbales. And just like with the African drums, I have always felt that I owe it to my customers. I have like a cultural responsibility to know about the instruments, right. to know where it's from, how it's played, how to fix it, how to tune it. Yeah. I mean, it's surprising how many music stores, they don't even know, like they don't even know how to pronounce djembe or something like that. Well,
I love it when you go in and the congas are all like tipped at the good angle.
Yeah, all cattywampus. Yeah. And so part of it was just sort of like my business philosophy that I can't just sell these instruments and not know anything about it. I actually owe my customers. So I think my first trip was around 2004, and at that point it was still illegal to travel to Cuba. It was basically, the Cubans love us. It was the United States State Department, right. That had rules against us traveling there.
Was it OFAC or something like that?
Yeah, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, OFAC. Basically, the way they structure it is you couldn't spend any money in Cuba, and if you did, then you ran afoul of the OFAC rules, and they could fine you. They could fine you $15,000, and so. At that point, we had to sneak into Cuba. It was the first of about 3 trips where you go to Cancun, and then you have a separate ticket purchased through a Canadian travel company, and then we would have their representative meet me at the airport in Cancun, and then give us the Cancun to Havana and back portion of the ticket. And then when you get back to the United States, let's say it's Miami, you just sort of tear all that stuff up. They ask, Mr. Boynton, where were you? Oh man, we went to Cancun. Beaches were great. Hung out at Senor Frog's. Man, drank margaritas. Man, I'm going back. Yeah. And that's how we did it. Is we kind of snuck in.
That worked, except for once they kind of caught our style.
Yeah. So you and I were traveling together. And our big mistake was the final leg of our trip was like Cancun to Minneapolis. So the customs and border folks in Minneapolis weren't really familiar with people going to Cuba. So yeah, you and I got harassed, had my cigars confiscated, and then I made the cardinal mistake of making a joke to the customs guys, like, yeah, I bet you guys are really going to toss those, eh?
Yeah.
Talking about the cohibas that they had just confiscated. Well, they didn't think that was funny.
At all.
And so I think the punchline of what they said when we were there is, Mr. Boynton, people who travel to Cuba for professional purposes are people who work for National Geographic or for CNN or the Wall Street Journal, or they're doing a dissertation for their degree at Harvard. You don't fit any of these categories, so I'm going to flag your account, and if you ever go into Cuba again, you will pay the fine.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was in about 2006.
Seems like I remember him also saying treating with the enemy or something.
Hey, probably so.
Yeah.
I mean, some of that is what makes it fun. You know,
Yeah.
is just the challenge of getting in. And then also we get so much propaganda about how the communist country and dictatorships and human rights and all that. Some of that is valid, but we forget about the people. And so when I was over there, I met everyday Cuban people who were lovely, and some of them have become friends for life.
Yeah.
And so for me, you know, this definitely fits my life philosophy of, you know, don't just take what they say on TV and believe everything. And so I challenged myself to go see what life was really like. And I'm glad that I did, because well, first of all, I thought that the Cubans hated us. They didn't want us. They're the ones who wouldn't let us into their country.
Right.
Not at all. The first thing that you see when you land in Havana is you see Air France, British Airways, Air Italia, and you quickly realize, oh my God, the whole rest of the world is there except for the Americans.
Yep.
And then even the customs people. Well, when you and I went those 2 times in the early 2000s, they wouldn't stamp your passport out of respect for us. So they would stamp a piece of paper that they stuck in your passport, and then when you left, you gave the customs officer that piece of paper, and then you didn't have any stamps showing that you had been in Cuba, so that you could arrive in the States and you wouldn't get in trouble. Well, the Cubans did that in deference to us, because
Right.
they wanted us to have the ability to travel there, to learn without getting in trouble.
Another one of the fun trips, if you want to go over it, was the when we went on tour with
Yeah.
Chispa.
Yeah, can you believe that we ended up on tour with like one of the major Cuban salsa bands?
Yeah.
And we weren't in the group.
No.
So again, this is probably your 3rd trip to Cuba?
I think that was, yeah.
So we're at about 2005, 2006, and our country still didn't have diplomatic relations with Cuba, and we also didn't have mail or phone, so you couldn't even write letters to our friends. So we had a buddy, Eduardo Velasquez, who we had met. He was a timbalero with one of the major bands, Chispa, and his accomplices, Los Cómplices. And so we decided we were going to go visit Eduardo,
Yeah.
and so we just like showed up at the airport, and then we grabbed a taxi. The taxi guy had like a little flip phone, a cell phone, and we gave him Eduardo's number and said, "Hey, can you call him and tell him that we're that Mr. James and Mr. Brad have arrived?" And so we just showed up at his house, and he was super happy to see us. He got out a bottle of rum. He welcomed us. And he's like, Mr. Brad, Mr. James, so how long are you here? And we're like, oh, we're so excited. We're here for 6 days. And then he frowned. You were there. And he's like, oh, pero no, lo siento. I'm so sorry. Because it's Carnival. And my band with Chispa, we're leaving tomorrow for a tour that's going around the island. And so, when are you leaving again, Brad? I said, well, it's about 6 days. He's like, we're like getting back in 6 days, so I won't see you. And then he paused. Then he looked at you, James, and me, and he's like, unless you guys want to come. So we gave each other a high five. He called his manager just to make sure it was on tour, just to make sure it was okay to go on tour. And then we commenced this amazing trip where we're on like an air-conditioned tour bus with a full-on salsa band with like sound engineers, drum techs, full horn section. And because the government in Cuba owns everything, by day we're like staying at government-owned hotels, swimming,
Very nice, yeah.
playing
baseball.
and ping pong.
Oh, ping pong. Oh, that's right, ping pong.
But anyway, so that was an amazing trip because we toured the country, but we did it sort of through the eyes of music with people who took care of us and who liked us, and so we could trust in that. And of course, we'd be playing in Santa Clara or Ciega d'Avila, and they would just hand us a güiro or like, "Be Brad, you play congas on this one, right?" I'm on stage. It's Carnival. I'm with Chispa y Los Cómplices. I'm playing the tumbadoras, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe
It's amazing
how my life has brought me here, and what an amazing opportunity. And again, you can't do this with the PhD behind your name. You have to do this just by being vulnerable, going out into the world, buying that plane ticket, and just making it happen. So that was again, this is at a time when you're not even supposed to be in the country, and just an amazing experience.
And then meeting Eduardo's wife's family in Ciego d'Avila.
Yep, and then buying langosta.
From El Capitan.
Yeah, on the black market, because, and this is still true today to my knowledge. They divert the lobster to the tourist towns and hotels. So locals are not allowed to eat lobster. I found it hard to find even chicken breast. We searched in Havana for an entire day to find chicken breast. Like first it was just like chicken leg, and then we're like, oh no, we need chicken breast, and they're like, no, like yeah, we just don't have it.
Eggs.
So sorry, no I. So we were with Eduardo's girlfriend's family and the neighbor El Capitan, who knew where to get langosta. So it was this funny thing. We were trying to get lobster, so we they made some phone calls. We drove a car to the middle of town, and then we opened up our trunk. And then I think we walked around the block, gave someone some money. Someone else came and put the langosta in the back of the trunk and closed it off. And then we went back and had a fabulous meal.
Oh, that was great.
But it was just a super local experience, and the kind of thing that, you don't plan for that, but like, it's just amazing. And you also learn to appreciate stuff like, so as Americans, we're privileged in that we can just, whether it's in America or it's in Cuba, we can just walk in and be like, yeah, I'll take 2 lobsters and a couple beers. And we take that for granted. And to live in a place where, like even finding eggs to nourish your family is a difficult thing. So these cultural experiences have also like deeply humbled me.
So, Brad, tell me about the first time you met Mamadi Keita.
Mamadi. So he's one of my major influences, one of the greatest living drummers, and he's had a huge impact on my life and my playing. So I had heard recordings, and he's a technician who just has like perfect hand technique and mathematical precision. And so again, this is actually, it was 1998, and do you want to know why? Because I still have the T-shirt from it, and I still wear it.
Oh, nice.
And so he was on a teaching tour in Spokane, Washington, of all places, because our friend Michael Moonbear brought Mamadi for a teaching tour. So I was familiar with the djembe and familiar with Mamadi's work, and so he was playing a rhythm for everybody, something simple like da do da do do da do da do do, which incidentally they call passport because there's about 50 different rhythms that use that supporting pattern as one of the parts, and so it's your passport into like 50 different rhythms. So he's playing that, except here's the thing, his hand technique is so perfect. He doesn't just have one slap or one tone, but he has like 3 or 4 different slaps which he can regulate, and 3 or 4 different tones, a couple different bass notes. And so he's playing this rhythm, da do da do do da do da do do, and his hands don't change, and the rhythm doesn't change. But within the rhythm, he starts playing a melody with the different tap slaps and tones, and he's like weaving this melody inside of this rhythm, and it just for me took it to a higher level because I had never seen playing like that. I had never seen a perfect hand technique like that.
Just has total control.
Yeah, and it's not by accident. He knows exactly how to weave these melodies within the rhythm. And so that, just like the first time when I saw Oboe Addy play, and he had 5 different sounds come out of one drum, hearing Mamadi use like even more hand techniques than that to create melodies within rhythms was something that opened my eyes, and so I knew that I wanted to study with them. So the following year I went with my buddy Duffy Boyles.
Oh yeah, Duff.
And we went to stayed in Mamadi's compound in Matoto, which is on the outskirts of Conakry. Basically in the epicenter, the heartland of where djembe culture comes from, which is largely the Malinke people in Guinea and Mali. And so for me, just as an extension of my interest in drumming and wanting to go to the source, that was my first of 3 trips to Guinea to see djembe in its original context, to see and meet the drum carvers. That's been a wonderful part of my life professionally as well, because I really do owe it to my customers to know about the drums, to know about the carvers, to know about the different woods, to know about the different skins. And you can only learn that stuff by actually hopping on a plane and going there. And so I feel like I've done a service to my customers, and it makes me feel better at the end of the day that I'm not just hawking a product like a burrito. Yeah. It's actually something that I care about and something that I'm interested in personally.
And then you met the carvers there and struck up relationships with those cats.
Exactly. And so even now I'll order like 100 drums at a time. So I'll get a few sets of Dununs, and I'll get some medium-sized drums and large ones, and I'll get like 100 full-size djembes, and I'll get goat skins and supplies. Well, they know that they're producing it for Brad of Rhythm Traders in Portland, Oregon, with whom they've had a relationship now for about 20 years.
Right.
And so the quality's higher, but also this is a great relationship because we don't have 15 different people with their hands in the pot, which would drive up the cost and drive down the quality. We have a group of carvers outside of Conakry who are carving drums and putting the skins on and preparing them for Rhythm Traders in Portland, Oregon, and then they literally put them in the minivan, take them down to the airport, and air freight them on Air France. It comes to Portland, Oregon. I clear them through customs, put them in a U-Haul, and bring them to my store. And instead of having 10 different levels in this supply chain between manufacturer and the end consumer, there's like 2. It's like there's the carvers. They send them to Brad. Brad sells them to his customers who love playing them because they have the real instrument from the source.
And then, can you explain a little bit about the mice? What is it? The mitra?
The matra djembe over here. This was a gift from our carvers to commemorate 25 years doing business with Rhythm Traders. We think this is the largest djembe in the world. And let me qualify that by saying it's carved from a single piece of wood. And so the head's about 22 inches. It's about 40 inches tall. So, when they cut down a tree, it's still wet, or it's called green. And so because it hasn't been kiln dried, it can weigh thousands of pounds. So that blank probably weighed thousands of pounds. Yeah. So I have pictures of literally our supplier, Mustafa Berite, and his carvers. They took the tools into the bush and carved the matra djembe.
They just camped out there?
They camped out until it was done.
Oh.
It might have taken a week. And so he sent that along as a gift without even telling me. Like I just opened up the shipment,
And there it is.
and there it was.
Yeah.
And so, if you look on it, there's our old logo. We called him Bongo Man. And so, as soon as I got the drum, I asked Mustafa, how did you find Bongo Man? And he's like, Brad, when you were here last, you gave me your business card.
Oh.
And on the business card, it had our logo.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, it's this terrific master djembe carved from a single piece of wood, commemorating 25 years of working together. And then it's actually signed by Mustafa, his wife Fanta, and a few of the other carvers. And it's quite a piece to behold.
You've had a lot of adventures, a lot of experience. What advice would you give someone?
There's so much, and yet you wonder, like, what is the piece of advice that is gonna be something that's
Right.
gonna influence you and change your life versus him and versus her. But I would just say just to do it, and what I mean by that is drums, as we know, are already very accessible. Like if you have a room full of instruments and you have a drum, and you have a guitar, and let's say you have a flute. Like a little kid's usually going to go up to the drum first,
Right.
because if they go up to the guitar, someone's going to be like, "Don't touch that! It's fragile. You can't play that."
Yeah.
And then the flute's probably going to be in a case, so you can't even see it anyway. But like drums are just so accessible, and for me, it was a game changer because I started playing. I started taking lessons in 3rd grade right after my parents got divorced, and so for me, it was a way that I could sort of escape from. Just having to think about the analytical world and think about what's the trouble in my family and mom and dad fighting and stuff like that, and also gave me a chance to build confidence and have my own expression. So as a kid, it was a way to sort of turn off the problems in the world and become a more creative person. But the other added bonus about drumming is it's physical.
Yeah.
And so as an 8-year-old, just to be able to make noise when usually in our culture, everyone's like, oh, shh, be quiet, especially if you're in church or you're at school or something like that, or in writing class. And then here, you could play John Bonham licks and play loudly. So to have something that was creative, that was loud, that was physical, set a platform for me that's been terrific the rest of my life, because now, like I mentioned, I have the skill. It's like a C-level skill.
You have some chops.
I'm like a C in all styles.
Okay.
Like tabla, C. Djembe, C. Quinto, C.
Yeah.
But it's gotten me into so many cultures, and I've formed so many relationships because I can be anywhere. Let's just say I'm in Turkey and I'm visiting the cymbal factories, and then they're like, "Oh, you're a drummer? Hey, we're drummers too." It's almost like you have instant camaraderie and instant trust, and so you can get inside of a culture quicker and then develop these lasting relationships. So my advice to a young kid is just to start, because you don't know where it's going to lead you. It'll help you make friends, learn social skills, develop confidence, but it also might end up being your passport to understand the world and make it a better place.
I want to play, I need to play, I love my drums, it's all I know, hey, let me blow, drumming is my thing, God gave it to me, you can't take it away from me.